Hello guys, welcome back. This is episode number 12 of this Clean Architecture course. In this episode, I am going to talk about how we can further refine our domain model with some value objects and enumerations. So I hope you've already watched the previous episodes. We have been evolving the domain model little by little. I told you that you don't need to have a perfect domain model. Uh, and little by little, you can refine it. You can evolve your domain model, and this is exactly what we have been doing lately, right? So let's start with the notes of episode 12. I've got this project here, and I'm on branch 12. As you can see here, we're going to go through the topic of this episode. So in this episode, as I told you, we're going to refine our domain model by extracting some value object, reusable value object, and defining some clear bounded properties. And that would help us to have a richer business domain model. So first, let's talk about the value object that we have been using for properties such as first name and last name, right? The text value object. It kind of encapsulates a string property, and it adds some layer, some validation, for example, to this string property. So what I am going to do, because if you take a look at my project, if I go to episode 11, my domain, if you take a look, for example, here, I have been using the text property for first name, last name, right? And for example, if I add another entity, I don't know, like department, I would have to again use this text property for the name of the department. But I would want to, make this text value object more reusable, and I want it to be able, what I want is to have a strongly typed uh, you know, uh, properties. Like for example, for first name, I would prefer to have a property of type first name. And that first name could inherit from a base text value object, but of course it needs to be configurable as well. For example, I would want to be able to specify the range of, characters, the number of characters for first name and last name. And then I would want to be able to use again the base type, the text, to create another value object called, for example, name or department name, which has a different range of characters, right? So this is what we are going to implement in this episode. So if I go back to episode 12, let's take a look here. So right now, uh, we're gonna create a base record called text, and then we are going to inherit from text to implement different types of, you know, uh, different types of text properties, like for example, first name, last name, and so on. If you take a look here, this is, the text property, the text, let me zoom out, the text value object. And the interesting thing here is that inside of the constructor, we are receiving a minimum length and a maximum length, right? So whenever we inherit from this value object, we will be able to specify the min length and max length of this value object. And then by doing this, we will be able to, for example, create two separate value objects for first name and last name like this. So first name, last name, of course, the name of each of these types convey meaning, right? First name, last name, it is specifically, kind of telling us that this type is responsible for storing the first name of an employee, for example. And then I am using the text record, right? And I am specifying the minimum length and maximum length. So the minimum length, for example, could be 1 character, the maximum length 50 characters, right? And then I am receiving this, value inside of the record that I've got. So let me show you what I've done here, right? If you take a look inside of this common folder, I have this text value object that I told you about. Then I've got these two separate value objects. So first name and last name. And then I have used these inside of my entity. Of course, this also depends on your domain and the way you are modeling your domain. This is not something that you would have to do all the time. For my case, this employee, entity, this HR domain, it makes more sense to separate these two value objects and have different types for first name and last name. But chances are you're working on, a domain model, and you do not need to do that. Your domain model would work perfectly fine, with a single text value object. So these value objects only represent intent and reduce misuse. Exactly. Next, I'm going to create two enumerations because enumerations can also be a part of your domain model. I'm going to have education level for the employee. I'm going to have employee role. As you can see here, there are three possible values for a role of an employee. And of course, the education level, which we're going to use later in a service, in a domain service, to kind of calculate the base salary of an employee. So again, if you're not familiar with what enumerations do, of course, you can take advantage of my, object-oriented programming playlist or the C# playlist. I assume that you're already familiar with what enumerations or enums are, why we use them, and so on. So now we're going to update the entity employee, right? So first off, as I told you, we're going to, replace the text type for first name and last name with the two separate value objects we created, first name and last name. And then we are going to create two different properties for education level and for employee role, right? And the rest is not going to change. So if I take you to this employee value object, you will see that I've got these two properties, right? Education level, employee role, and of course, I've got these two enumerations, education level and employee role here, right? So next, I am going to add another entity to my domain model. So I told you again, your domain model doesn't need to be perfect from the beginning. Little by little, you evolve it. You refine your understanding of your domain, and you start adding entities, value objects, you refine your model. So this is what we are going to do. Let me show you. So adding the department entity. Now we're going to create another domain entity called department, right? The department has, of course, a name, right? The simplest thing for a department is to be able to store a name for that department. And of course, a list of employees working in that department. Of course, as our employee, it's going to inherit from entity, right? So it's going to have like a list of domain events that it can, store, and it can kind of publish. Then we've got a private list of employees. We've got this constructor. As you can see here, we've got a simple guard clause on the name property. The name is of type department name. If you take a look here, the department name is another value object inheriting from that text value object. And then we've got this, I read-only collection of employees, as you can see here. So this kind of allows the consumer of our code to be able to see, it's a read-only collection, by the way, to see the employees working in this department. So each department instance maintains a list of employees working in that department. And as you can see here, this is the value object that we've got. So the department name is a type inheriting from that base type. And then we've got this string, input parameter. And then we are specifying that the name of a property, the name of a department can be 1 to 50 characters. Let me take you to Visual Studio and show you what I've done here. So the department, as you can see here, is this class. It is inheriting from entity, right? The department name is this, as I showed you, inheriting from this base value object. I'm going to show you the events as well. So again, we've got this event for a department. Whenever a department is created, we're going to have a domain event, which, as you can see here, is, has a property of type department, which of course, represents the department that was created, right? And of course, as what we did for the employee, right now we've got this, constructor. We've got this private constructor. What we can do is to create a public static factory method, like for example, create, and then we can, create a domain event, a department created domain event whenever a new department is created. Or for example, we could have, and of course, we're going to implement this as well. We could have a method to add an employee to a department, and whenever a new employee is added to the department or is removed from a department, we can also emit, correct corresponding domain events for those operations as well. So again, this encapsulation makes the domain richer, allows us to reason more clearly about business rules involving departments and their employees. Let's talk a little bit about the things we've done. So reusability, you can see that reusability is in action here. We are, inheriting from the text base type, and we are creating the department name. Value objects like first name, last name, and department name, right? They convey meaning because text is a very generic term. So we decided to have the text record type and then inherit from that with specific names, meaningful names. And then of course it is possible to configure them further by, for example, specifying the range of characters, right? So we've got two enumerations, employee role, education level, that we're gonna, use in the future episodes. And again, the new entity, department, that could contain some data and behavior, which is gonna, again, get refined as we go through the future episodes. So in the next episode, this is my plan. We're gonna, again, refine the model. And we're gonna talk a little bit about domain services. So this is a very important concept, another important concept when it comes to domain modeling. We've been talking about domain modeling, we've been talking about entities, value objects, we've been talking about domain events and how to implement them, how to react to them. And the next topic is going to be domain services and of course aggregates. I'm going to show you what aggregates are and how to implement them inside of the domain model that we have. Another thing before I wrap up this course is that before I wrap up this episode is that I want to tell you to check out my modular monolith course. I think it can help you a lot. It can help you understand what we are doing here better because I have used some of the principles, practices that I am introducing here inside of that course as well. So if you are looking for like an example of, let's say, implementing these concepts in a real project, right? I would highly recommend checking out that, modular monolith playlist that I've got on my channel. And that's it for this episode. I'm going to wrap up this episode here. Stay tuned. In the next one, we're going to talk about domain services. We're going to refine the domain model further by adding some meaningful domain services. Thank you.